Welcome to the Mind Spark, bringing you the latest news from around the world. Tonight we examine the unraveling of a partnership that shaped North America for over a century. The United States and Canada, once models of cooperation, now face a rift triggered by America First policies. What began as a trade dispute has spiraled into a crisis, with Ontario pulling a $20 billion green tech investment from the US and sending it to Europe. This decision, rooted in lost trust, is shaking the economic foundations of both nations. American jobs and prestige are on the line as Canada signals it's seeking new partners. The consequences are real: a fractured alliance, lost opportunities, and a warning about the cost of broken promises. We'll trace how this conflict began, Ontario's bold move, and the impact on American families. This is the high price of a friendship in crisis. The seeds of this crisis were sown with President Trump's sweeping tariffs, aimed at protecting American industries, but hitting Canada hard. Canada retaliated, targeting iconic American products, and escalating a trade war between two deeply integrated economies. Businesses caught in the crossfire faced uncertainty as NAFTA gave way to a more contentious USMCA. The rhetoric shifted from partnership to rivalry, eroding decades of goodwill. The dispute soon spilled into energy and investment, chilling cross-border cooperation. Ontario, feeling the sting, prepared a response that would escalate the conflict. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would cost the US dearly. This wasn't just about tariffs, it was about trust unraveling. The fallout would soon be felt far beyond the negotiating table. Ontario, battered by tariffs and mounting economic uncertainty, decided it could no longer stand by. The province, long a cornerstone of Canada's economy, was feeling the pressure from new trade barriers and shifting US policies. Leaders in Toronto realized that action was needed, not just for Ontario, but for the entire country. In a bold move, Ontario imposed a hefty reciprocity fee on electricity exports to the US, directly targeting American states that had grown dependent on affordable Canadian power. This fee was designed not only to recoup losses from tariffs, but to send a clear message: Ontario would defend its interests. The announcement sent shockwaves through American energy markets. Suddenly, costs for millions of US consumers and businesses began to rise. Energy traders scrambled, and utility companies warned of higher bills, but Ontario wasn't finished making its point. At the same time, a $20 billion battery gigafactory, once destined for the US Midwest, was suddenly up for grabs. The project, seen as a beacon of future industry, now hung in the balance. Ontario's premier took to the podium, urging the international consortium behind the factory to reconsider their US plans. He cited growing instability, unpredictable policy shifts, and a climate of hostility toward Canadian partners. Working swiftly, Ontario officials opened talks with European partners. Within weeks, the investment was redirected to Europe, where stability, partnership, and mutual respect were assured. The move was a diplomatic coup for Ontario. The message was unmistakable: Canada would no longer support a neighbor that treated it as an adversary. The era of one-sided cooperation was over. The US lost not just a factory, but a powerful symbol of trust, shared progress, and cross-border opportunity. Communities that had hoped for new jobs and investment were left reeling. Ontario's bold action transformed what had been a simmering trade dispute into a full-blown international crisis. Tensions escalated as both sides dug in. The economic and political aftershocks rippled across North America. Analysts warned that the consequences would be felt for years, affecting everything from energy prices to diplomatic relations. The era of quiet, easy cooperation between Canada and the US had come to an abrupt and dramatic end. The battery gigafactory's move to Europe was a seismic win for the EU, and a devastating loss for the US-European nations competed fiercely, offering incentives and stability the US could no longer guarantee. The consortium praised Europe's commitment to green energy and predictable trade. The new plant became a crown jewel for Europe's green transition, attracting further investment and jobs. President Trump lashed out, blaming Canada and Europe, but the deal was done. The US lost a generational opportunity, thousands of jobs, and a foothold in the future of automotive technology. The consequences of protectionism were now painfully clear. Europe's gain was America's self-inflicted loss. The world was watching and taking notes. Nowhere was the fallout more acute than in the American Midwest. States like Michigan and Ohio, banking on the battery plant, saw hopes dashed overnight. Local leaders and workers, powerless against global politics, faced the loss of thousands of future-proof jobs. Ontario's electricity fees drove up costs, squeezing manufacturers and households alike. The very regions tariffs were meant to protect now suffered most. State leaders, frustrated and angry, began questioning Washington's strategy. A coalition of governors demanded a diplomatic reset with Canada. The crisis was no longer abstract, it was a daily reality for American families. The lesson protectionism can backfire, hurting those it aims to help. The battery deal marked a turning point in North American relations. What was once a seamless partnership between neighbors suddenly became a source of tension and uncertainty. The agreement, intended to secure supply chains and boost domestic industries, instead exposed deep rifts in trust and cooperation. Canada, feeling betrayed by its closest ally, began to look eastward. Leveraging the CETA trade agreement, Canadian leaders sought to diversify their economic ties and reduce reliance on the US. This pivot toward Europe was not just about trade, it was a statement of independence and a search for new partners in a rapidly changing world. European companies, sensing opportunity, saw Canada as a stable and welcoming gateway to North America. Investments flowed in, while American businesses faced new regulatory barriers and growing uncertainty. Factories that once thrived on cross-border trade now struggled to adapt, and some were forced to close their doors. The once seamless continental economy began to fragment. Increased border checks and declining trade threatened U.S. competitiveness. As industries on both sides of the border felt the strain, the economic fabric that had bound North America together for decades was starting to unravel. Geopolitically, a divided North America weakened America's influence on the world stage. Allies and rivals alike watched as the U.S. struggled to maintain its leadership, questioning whether it could still be relied upon as a partner. Canada's growing alignment with Europe began to shift global dynamics. From climate policy to digital governance, new coalitions emerged, often leaving the US on the sidelines. The balance of power was subtly but unmistakably changing. The US could no longer count on automatic Canadian support in international forums, where once they spoke with one voice, now their interests diverged and their influence diminished. What was meant to make America stronger had, paradoxically, left it more isolated than ever before. The circle of trusted partners was shrinking, and the sense of security was fading. The world's closest alliance was now at risk, and rivals like China and Russia were eager to exploit the growing rift. They watched closely, ready to step in where trust had eroded. The cost of lost trust was becoming clear. Markets reacted with volatility, and business leaders faced tough decisions about where to invest and whom to trust. North America's unity, once its greatest strength, was now its greatest vulnerability. The cracks in the alliance were no longer hidden, they were visible to the world. The consequences of this shift would echo for a generation, shaping the lives of future leaders, workers, and citizens across the continent. The story of North American cooperation was being rewritten, and its outcome remained uncertain. To better understand the far-reaching consequences of the crisis, we reached out to a panel of leading experts from diverse fields: economics, law, and international relations. Their insights shed light on the complex web of issues at play and the difficult road ahead for both nations. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned economist, described the ongoing trade war as a self-inflicted wound, one that has not only eroded decades of carefully built trust, but also undermined the spirit of cooperation that once defined the US-Canada partnership. She emphasized that the pursuit of short-term political or economic gain has come at the expense of long-term stability and mutual prosperity. Mark O'Connell, a respected trade lawyer, highlighted the deep and intricate integration of US-Canada supply chains. He explained that tariffs and protectionist measures don't just hurt one side, they disrupt businesses, workers, and communities on both sides of the border, creating ripple effects that are felt far beyond the negotiating table. According to O'Connell, Ontario's drastic actions were a direct response to the threat posed to this vital integration. The province felt compelled to act swiftly to protect its economic interests and the livelihoods of its citizens. Dr. Samuel Chen, an international economist, warned that in times of uncertainty, capital always seeks stability, not chaos. He pointed out that while Europe offered a sense of certainty and predictability, the US was increasingly seen as unpredictable, driving investors and businesses to look elsewhere for safer opportunities. The decision to relocate the battery plant, Chen argued, was not just a reaction to immediate pressures, but a logical business move in an environment where unpredictability had become the norm. Companies, he said, must prioritize survival and growth, even if it means leaving behind long-standing partners. A former U.S. ambassador to Canada offered a powerful analogy, comparing trust between nations to a bank account. Years of collaboration had built up a healthy balance, but recent actions, trade disputes, broken promises, and public disagreements had resulted in significant withdrawals, leaving the account dangerously overdrawn. The experts agreed that rebuilding this relationship would not be quick or easy. It would take years of patient effort, steady and respectful leadership, and a willingness to listen and compromise on both sides. Collectively, the panel concluded that this was more than just a lost business deal, it was a stark warning to both countries. The consequences of protectionism and unpredictability extend far beyond economics, threatening the very foundation of trust and cooperation. When partners are driven away by uncertainty, competitors are quick to step in and fill the void. The rise of rival nations in the battery industry is a clear sign of the risks involved. Once celebrated as a model of cross-border cooperation, the US-Canada relationship now stands as a cautionary tale for the world, a reminder of how quickly trust can be lost and how difficult it is to regain. Repairing this fractured friendship will demand not only humility and vision, but also a renewed commitment to shared values and open dialogue. The stakes could not be higher. The choices made now will shape the future of both nations and the global economy for years to come. Europe emerged as the clear winner, securing a $20 billion investment and a reputation for stability. The US, once the top destination for global projects, now faced a crisis of confidence. The loss of the battery plant signaled a shift in the global race for green technology. America's innovative power was undermined by fractured supply chains and lost trust. The trade war complicated efforts to nearshore production, forcing companies to prioritize stability over proximity. Even the closest allies could be driven apart by hostile policies. For global business, the lesson was stark. Geopolitical risk now shapes every major investment. America's loss was Europe's gain, and the world was recalibrating. The rules of global competition had changed. This is a cautionary tale about the cost of broken alliances in an interconnected world. The path forward begins with rebuilding trust, through diplomacy, dialogue, and shared interests. Leaders must step back from confrontation and restore stability for workers and businesses on both sides of the border. America's strength has always come from robust alliances, not isolation. The world is watching to see if the US can lead by partnership, not coercion. The cost of failure is measured in lost jobs and diminished influence. The urgent task is to repair what's been broken and remember, our greatest strength is working together. The future depends on it.